President Cyril Ramaphosa says the group of Palestinian refugees who arrived in the country last night is being processed and the government will make an announcement on their status soon. More than 150 Palestinian refugees were on board the flight that landed at OR Tambo International Airport. 130 of them have been given temporary stay in South Africa. Now, the group fled Israel's bombardment of Gaza.
The Border Management Authority was fully seized with this matter, and they were in full control of the situation. And I'm not concerned that there will be loopholes and holes left for anybody to come through. This one we did because it was a different and special case of a people that we have supported as a country, people who have been put under a great deal of suffering and stress. So we are just at the beginning of processing everything. We will process their presence here and we will then make an announcement.
Home Affairs Minister Leon Schreiber explained the delays after the group's arrival. They had to stay on the aircraft for over 10 hours before being allowed to disembark.
It was established that the absence of stamps, return tickets and accommodation addresses did not indicate that the travellers wished to apply for asylum. As a result, once it was confirmed that they would be provided with accommodation and care during their visit, I presented the new fact set to the BMA Commissioner for consideration, including on humanitarian grounds. Once satisfied that the absence of certain elements from their itinerary would not leave them destitute in South Africa in the absence of any asylum claims, the travellers were granted entry into South Africa on the standard 90-day visa exemption, subject to compliance with the standard conditions. By the time that entry was granted, 23 members of the group had already taken onward flights to other destinations. All of the travellers are in possession of valid passports, and at present, none of them have applied for asylum. The Department of Home Affairs has further taken note of a statement issued on social media this morning by the Palestinian embassy, raising some disturbing claims as it relates to the origin of this flight. The department will continue to work with the Palestinian embassy and the rest of the South African security cluster to probe these claims. However, even as we do so, we remain steadfast in our commitment to safeguarding the dignity of vulnerable people at all times.
For more, we're now joined by Dr. Fatima Hendricks, who's an activist and member of the Global Sumud Flotilla SA. Dr. Hendricks, good to have you on the program this evening. So when you first heard that over 150 Palestinian refugees were left stranded on this aircraft at OR Tambo due to this missing exit stamps from what we're hearing from the minister, what was your immediate response as both an activist but also as a member of the Global Sumud?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. We are always filled with hope when efforts are made to assist refugees and people fleeing really genocides, not just in Palestine, but around the world. But we do need to look at this both from a humanitarian perspective as well as larger geopolitics. So the question that I had in my mind was, the questions and the alarm bells that came to my mind was, is this part of a medical evacuation? Is this something that was pre-planned because there was no news out beforehand? And we also know that for months and months, the Zionist regime has been talking about the forced displacement of Palestinians to so-called third countries under what they called a voluntary exit plan, with voluntary immigration, as they call it, or voluntary evacuation. And in essence, Palestinians are being trafficked and deported under the goal of the Zionist regime to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. So I had, on the one hand, humanitarian hope, but on the other hand, lots of questions and alarm bells. And I think it's part of the reason that we need to explore and investigate the circumstances around this and other flights, as well as in March, the Security Cabinet of the Zionist regime launching the Voluntary Immigration Bureau for Palestinians in Gaza as part of this effort to relocate Palestinians, forcibly displaced Palestinians, to third countries. So there are lots of questions.
There are lots of questions, and reports also then suggest that Israeli authorities then deliberately withheld exit stamps to create further obstacles. How common is this kind of bureaucratic weaponization, and what does it, how does it impact, or rather, let me say, what impact does it have on refugees who are trying to flee this conflict zone here?
Absolutely, and this is we really need to re-emphasize that this is really not a conflict zone. This is a genocide, and understand from South Africa's position, taking Israel to the ICJ as well as the ICJ measures that we have as a global community, not just South Africa, but as a global community, a responsibility to support Palestinians in this occupation, in illegal and immoral occupation, as well as the genocide. So we see this weaponization by Israel, where even medical evacuations have resulted in the failure for medical evacuations has resulted in the death of many Palestinians, and the continued blocking of Palestinians' free access into and out of Gaza, the occupied territories, is something that is very long-standing. So when Israel makes these moves to assist under so-called humanitarian help, under this pretext, to deport and to assist Palestinians in leaving the Gaza Strip, we have to ask why, and then we also have to, ask why this is the case. What were they trying to achieve in terms of the further frustrations and humiliation of Palestinians in terms of their destinations and the lack of exit stamps?
So given South Africa's long-standing stance, Dr. Hendricks, of solidarity with Palestine, what humanitarian obligations, in your view, does the country then have in situations like this? And do you feel that those obligations were met promptly this time?
Absolutely. I think we have to understand and really contextualize this in terms of the important role that South Africa plays in supporting refugees from around the world. South Africa, and especially in Africa, South Africa has about 250,000 refugees. And these refugees that have come to South Africa are fleeing armed conflict, ethnic violence, famine, and genocide. And South Africa has a robust legal framework on paper, but like in South Africa, in different areas of our societal construction, we have difficulty with implementation, and that is these are really significant systemic issues which both government and civil society are really challenged with in terms of documentation for refugees, access to services, as well as societal issues around xenophobia, and there's a lot of work to do on refugee rights. And so given that no prior notice was given of the over 150 Palestinians that were arriving on these flights, and given that, there was suspicions or there were question marks, there is done better. Having Palestinians sit on a plane for over 10 hours with no access to water and food and access to toilets and being restricted. These are significant factors that we have to look at to improve our processing and assistance of refugees. And they have to be looked at in the context, in context-specific situations as well as systemically. And so I believe that an inquiry, investigations into what actually is transpiring in this case is absolutely essential to get to the bottom of what is happening here. Is it Israel's intent here to embarrass the South African government? And given that the Palestinian embassy has released the statement saying that this flight, which was chartered and came through Kenya, was was done by an unregistered and misleading organization that is really taking advantage of the Palestinian people, deceiving families, taking money, stealing money from them, taking money, getting them to pay between $1,000 and $5,000, some estimates like that, and facilitating these irregular travel and irresponsible travel in this manner. It leaves many questions for all of us.
Yeah. As we start to understand a bit more about what happened here, civil society groups like Gift of the Givers, for instance, were seen as instrumental in resolving this impasse. What does this then reveal about the role of NGOs in this cross-border humanitarian crisis that we're learning about?
Well, when we understand that these struggles of settler colonialism are international struggles, and that there are, because these struggles are connected globally against the extractive policies of these entities that want to exploit not only the resources of the country, but really inflict damage on the people of these countries. We have to look at NGOs within a global context and the frame and support of these NGOs as a global movement in resistance, as a global movement of upholding the universal principles of human rights and of justice. And we are fortunate in South Africa to have a powerful organization like Gift of the Givers, who has decades of experience, as well as other NGOs that mobilize internationally as part of the broader movement to support not only refugees, but people within high conflict zones.
So DIRCO's intervention through its Director General, Zane Dango, as well as Minister Ronald Lamula, this ultimately resolved the standoff that we saw. How significant, in your view, was this decision in really reinforcing South Africa's diplomatic position on Palestine?
I think it's really important that we understand, and as a global Samud Flotilla participant, I can certainly relate to this. When we go into these international settings, we really understand the absolutely significant role that and stance that South Africa has in the global community, not just as, within the context of South Africa as a liberation, example in a post-apartheid South Africa, but fundamentally in South Africa's continued stands for justice and for upholding universal values. And so South Africa provides thought leadership. Of course, there are many gaps and there's much that we have to do. But the role and the leadership from these, units or these functions within our government are really significant, not just for South Africa, but internationally in terms of the leadership they provide. This is something that is much appreciated.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Fatima Hendricks, also shedding light on this human and political dimension of this unfolding situation as these refugees finally find some relief after a harrowing journey. South Africa's actions will continue to shape the narrative on global solidarity and human rights. We'll also keep tracking the story quite closely as well.